Welcome to Whispers in the Dark, where every shadow hides a secret, and every tale leaves a scar. Here, we unravel the forgotten, the cursed, and the damned. Dim the lights, lock the doors, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely, because some stories don't like being told.
I was born into the end of the world, not after, not during, but into it. I've never seen the cities they talk about in books, never touched cold glass windows in a building taller than the sky. All I've ever known is ash, silence, and devotion. They call us the chosen. But there's nothing divine about the Hastings cult. Especially not when they start preparing you for marriage. Her name was never really hers. The high priest gave it to her the night she was presented at the altar, her 3rd birthday. She remembers firelight, smoke, the low hum of chants, and the taste of blood from biting her own tongue trying not to cry. Her earliest memories are of hard dirt floors, sleeping beside other children under rotting blankets, and being taught that love was obedience, and that pain was purity. Education didn't mean books or learning about stars. It meant ritual rehearsals, memorizing sacred verses, and silence, always silence. Her mother was cold and devout, always watching from the corner of her eye, always just one heartbeat away from a slap or a whispered warning. Her father, well, he believed he was holy. And in their world, belief was enough to make it true. She watched animals being sacrificed. She helped prepare the feasts when outsiders were taken in, tested, and never seen again. They say the marriage binds you to God. But the only thing I've seen it bind people to is the grave. 3 girls, Lenny, Ruth, and Cal, all friends she grew up with, vanished into the ceremony. Lenny was taken at 16. The wedding lasted 3 days. On the 4th, they burned her clothes and said she had ascended. Mara found her bracelet in the blood ditch behind the chapel. Ruth screamed the night before her wedding. The elders beat her into silence. Cal didn't resist at all. She just disappeared, like her spirit left her body before they even walked her down the path. That's when Mara knew she had to run. The man she's set to marry is older than her father, pale like something that's never seen the sun. His eyes are always wet and not with tears. He touches her hand in front of the others. They smile. She feels a bile rise in her throat every time he says her name. He believes he'll live forever. He calls her his sacred vessel. But to her, his death in robes. They give you 1 year to prepare for the wedding. I used that year to prepare for war. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I needed to move. To not be there anymore. I thought the stream was a sign from something older than the cult. But I forgot. They control everything here, even the water. The night she first tried to escape, Mara was 16. The announcement of her engagement had been made during the eclipse, when the high priest laid his cold hand on her shoulder and called her his bride-in-waiting. Everyone clapped. She couldn't breathe. She waited 3 days. No one noticed she was skipping meals. That's when she stole the compass from the high priest's study, an old rusted thing encased in glass, its needle twitching like it was nervous too. She crept out past curfew, the moon shrouded in fog. The woods hummed with insects and whispers. She followed the stream, keeping the compass pointed north, trusting its strange spinning to guide her. She walked for hours. Everything looked the same, rocks shaped like broken faces, trees with rope-burned branches. Eventually, she saw the firelight in the distance and dropped to her knees, weeping. She thought it was a camp. Maybe survivors. Maybe a way out. But it wasn't. It was the main fire pit in the center of the Hastings compound. Somehow, she had looped back to the beginning. She fell asleep in the grass, the compass spinning endlessly in her hand. Her mother found her at dawn. No words. Just a slap that knocked her down. Mara expected a trial or penance, but instead, her mother just walked away. It scared her more than punishment. They say the dead rest beneath the chapel. But there's nothing resting there. Just bones, tunnels, and echoes that answer questions you didn't ask. She discovered the tunnel by accident during one of her forced prayer hours in the chapel. The floorboard under the altar creaked differently than the others. She waited weeks before investigating, memorizing the patterns, making sure no one ever saw her look too long at one spot. Eventually, she pried it open and descended. The crypt smelled of salt and old blood. Candles were forbidden there, so she carried a stolen jar of fireflies instead. She followed the tunnel until she hit a wall of thick iron bars and a switch on the other side. She returned each night for a week, carving a thin hook from scrap metal to pull the lever. When she finally did it, the gate screeched open like it hadn't moved in years. She ran. The tunnel opened to a clearing, beyond it, the perimeter fence. She ran faster than she ever had. But she didn't see the wires. The fence was electrified. The moment she touched it, pain surged through her, lighting up her bones like lightning trapped inside skin. She collapsed. When she awoke, her mother was kneeling beside her, pressing herbs into the burns with cold hands. Again, no questions. Just the treatment, and the silence. But she didn't forget. It wasn't the hunger that hurt. It was the way everyone looked through me like I was a ghost already. After the second escape, her mother locked her in their sleeping quarters and forbade food. Mara wasn't allowed to speak during daily rituals. The elders stared at her like she was unclean. Children whispered when she passed. One threw ashes at her robe. She went 5 days with no food. Her mother said it was cleansing her soul. Mara knew better. It was erasing her will, and it was almost working. They said no one survives beyond the salt trail. But maybe no one came back because what they found was worse than the cult. The deeper she went, the less the world made sense. Trees leaned in toward her, their branches brushing her shoulders like claws. Fog kissed her ankles. The ground was soft, like flesh just beneath the skin. At first, she thought the dead were stories, myths to keep people from running. Until she saw them. They were tall, pale, covered in ash. Their eyes glowed faint blue, like the altar candles. One of them tilted its head and whispered her name. Not Mara. The name the high priest gave her, the one they never said outside the chapel. She hid beneath a fallen tree for hours, shaking. They never touched her. Just wandered. Watched. Mouthed words silently. She saw one lift its shirt, its ribs had been stitched with thread. These were not spirits. These were punished escapees. Whatever the cult had done to them, it was worse than death. Still, Mara kept walking. Every step felt like choosing her own name again. Her own fate. The forest wants me dead. The cult wants me pure. But I want to be free. I escaped the cult, but not the world it built. They planted seeds in my head, roots I didn't know were growing. Now I'm out here, beyond the salt trail, and I don't know what's worse. What they did to me. Or what I might become. Mara wandered north, using moss and memory as her compass. Her body ached from the cold, her skin still sticky with dried blood. Every rustle in the woods made her flinch. She didn't sleep. Not really. Only shut her eyes and counted until dawn. On the third day, she stumbled into Old Tollan Ridge, a dead town buried in overgrowth. The buildings were collapsed, their skeletons jutting out like broken ribs. There were no people, just shadows and wind. She found an abandoned fire station, a rusted water barrel, broken food tins, a photo of a family taped to a locker, faces blurred by rot. She cried then, the kind of crying that empties your stomach. It was the first time she was alone and not being watched. She stayed there for 2 nights, collecting anything useful, boots, wire, painkillers, a child's storybook. But she could feel them coming. Not the dead ones in the woods, the living ghosts from her past. She heard the bells on the third night. The bells meant they were close. The Hastings cult doesn't forgive. And it never forgets. Especially not when you belong to the high priest. They came in cloaks. Silent. Like shadows dragging candles behind them. She watched them from the fire station roof, her heart beat so loud she swore it would give her away. One of them bent down near the old locker and whispered, "Mara, child, come home. You're forgiven. You're blessed. You're still pure." She nearly vomited. Another one had a tracker hound with ash-crusted eyes. She threw a rotting tin far into the trees to draw them away. Then she ran. Again. I wasn't free. I was just loose. By the fifth day, Mara found something unexpected, a house that wasn't ruined. It stood in a meadow, surrounded by standing stones and bone-white trees. Its windows were shuttered, but smoke curled from the chimney. She crept forward, knife in hand. Her instincts screamed, but her hunger screamed louder. Inside was warm, a fire, a pot of soup, a bed with real sheets, and a woman. She was old, with silver hair braided down her back. She didn't ask Mara's name, just looked at her and said, "You smell like cult fire and grave ash. Sit down. You're not the first." Mara ate. Slowly. Every bite felt like rebellion. She tried to ask who the woman was, but the woman only replied, "They call me Hollow Sister. I help the broken ones." That night, Mara dreamed of the forest whispering in her ear, speaking in her mother's voice. She woke up screaming. The Hollow Sister showed Mara a map. On it were marks, places the cult had touched. Not just the Hastings woods, but everywhere. Cities burned down. Entire villages turned inside out. Even in the ruins of civilization, the cult had branches, offshoots, fragments growing like fungus. "They're older than the world ending," the woman said. "The Hastings name just wears a new face every time the fire resets. You think you ran from the cult, girl? You just ran into a wider net." On her 8th night away, Mara ventured too far from the house and heard humming. Soft. Off-key. Familiar. She turned, and there they were. The same dead-eyed walkers from the woods. Only this time, one of them knelt and handed her something. A wedding veil, hers. It was burned at the edges. Still warm. She ran. The hollow sister met her at the edge of the trees, held her still. They're not the dead. Not all of them. Some are the forgotten. The ones the cult erased with their rituals. Others are the ones who tried to leave, like you. But they were caught before they made it through the veil of the trees. Their minds were broken. Their spirits hollowed. Now they walk. Until the cult decides to use them again. Mara stands at a cliff now, overlooking the dark valley below. She knows the cult is still after her. She knows this is only the beginning. But she's stronger now. She has tools. Knowledge. A real name. A real story. They can burn my name from the altar. They can send the dead to haunt my trail. But they can't take me back the moment I chose not to kneel. And with that, she descends into the valley, a survivor among ruins, hunted by faith and fire, but alive.
Thank you for listening to Whispering in the Dark. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Haunted Mansion Stories for more chilling tales from the shadows. Every listen, comment, and follow helps us keep the darkness alive, one whisper at a time.